We spend so much of our lives building a fortress, not realizing that the same walls keeping the world out are also keeping us trapped inside. When you grow up in a house where your emotions or where your needs were invisible, you learn a very specific survival skill. You learn how to be no trouble. You learn how to take up as little space as possible. This isn't just a personality trait. It is a blueprint for how you move through the world. To rewire your brain for love, we first have to look at the foundations of that fortress and understand that while it kept you safe once, it is now the very thing keeping you lonely. Think of the energy it takes to maintain that structure. Every day, you wake up and check the perimeter. You scan the faces of the people you love, or the people you want to love, looking for the slightest hint of boredom, irritation, or withdrawal. Because to you, silence doesn't just mean peace. Silence means you've been forgotten. Or worse, silence means a storm is coming that you'll have to weather alone. So, you reinforce the gates. You become the person who never asks for a favor, the person who always has it together, the one who is fine, even when the world is crumbling. You've become a master architect of a life that looks perfect from the outside, but feels hollow within. This architecture was designed in the dark. It was built during those long afternoons when you realized that crying didn't bring comfort. It only brought more isolation. Or perhaps it was built in the moments where you achieved something great, only to have it met with a distracted nod or a change of subject. You learned that your inner world was a private burden. You began to believe that love was a transaction, something you had to earn by being useful, by being invisible, or by being the version of yourself that everyone else needed you to be. But here is the heavy truth. You cannot be truly loved if you cannot be truly seen. By hiding behind these walls, you are only allowing people to love the fortress, not the person living inside it. You might have friends, partners, or a family, yet you still feel an ache of loneliness in the middle of a crowded room. That's because you are still waiting for someone to scale the walls, but you've made them I'm high that no one even knows there's a heart left to find. You are protecting yourself from a rejection that happened decades ago, using a defense system that has long since outlived its purpose. To rewire this part of your brain, you have to start acknowledging the sheer exhaustion of being your own only protector. You have to admit that you are tired of being no trouble. There is a profound grief in realizing that you've spent your life trying to be easy to love, only to find that it has made you impossible to reach. This section of our journey is about standing in the courtyard of that fortress and looking at the stones. We aren't going to blow them up. We are going to look at them with compassion. We are going to say, "Thank you for keeping me safe when I was small. But I am big enough now to survive the open air." We have to understand that the quiet heart isn't quiet because it has nothing to say. It's quiet because it was told 1,000 times in 1,000 small ways that its voice didn't matter. It's quiet because it learned to keep its rhythm to itself so as not to disturb the people in the other rooms. But that rhythm is your life force. It is the core of who you are. Rewiring for love begins the moment you decide that being known is worth the risk of being too much. It begins when you decide that you would rather be seen and misunderstood than be hidden and safe. We are learning to dismantle the architecture of isolation, brick by painful brick, to make room for a home where someone else can finally walk through the door and find you there, waiting. Think about those moments where you have something big to share. Maybe a small victory at work or a heavy weight on your chest. And your first instinct is to swallow it. That impulse comes from a childhood where the mirror was broken. Usually, a child looks at a parent to see their own value reflected back. They bring a drawing, a scraped knee, or a sudden burst of laughter to the person who is supposed to be their world, and they wait for the reflection. They wait for the "I see you, I hear you," or "you matter." But if that mirror was clouded by neglect, you grew up seeing nothing. You stared into a void where there should have been a response, and in that silence, you drew the most painful conclusion a child can reach: that if you weren't being seen, it was because there was nothing worth looking at. Carl Jung once said, "The most damaging thing in the life of a child is the unlived life of the parent." When those who were supposed to guide us were emotionally absent, paralyzed by their own shadows, or simply looking the other way, we were left to parent our own pain in the dark. We became little adults before we were even children. We learned to read the room before we learned to read books. We became experts at sensing the subtle shifts in the air, the coldness of a parent's withdrawal, or the heaviness of their silence, and we adjusted ourselves accordingly. We learned to quiet our joy so it wouldn't be too loud for their fatigue, and we learned to hide our sadness so it wouldn't be too much for their instability. This echo follows you into your adult life. It's the phantom feeling that you are an interruption. When you're at a dinner with friends and everyone is sharing stories, you might feel a story rising in your throat, only to have a voice inside whisper, "Don't. No one really cares." It's the reason you apologize for things that aren't your fault, or why you feel a wave of shame after you've shared something vulnerable, even if the person you shared it with was kind. That shame is the echo of the unseen child trying to protect you from the danger of being noticed. It is the old survival mechanism reminding you that, once upon a time, being invisible was the only way to stay safe from the sting of being ignored. We carry this broken mirror within us, and we use it to look at ourselves every day. We see a version of ourselves that is small, unimportant, or fundamentally other. We think we are broken. But the truth is far simpler and far more heartbreaking. We were just never reflected. A child's sense of self is built through the eyes of their caregivers. If those eyes were always looking elsewhere, at a bottle, a screen, a career, or their own internal ghosts, the child never finds their own face. They become a ghost themselves, moving through life with a profound sense of unbelonging. Rewiring this isn't about finding a better person to look at you, though healthy relationships help. It starts with you becoming the mirror. It means looking at those parts of yourself that you've kept in the basement for 30 years and finally acknowledging them. It means saying to that unseen child, I see why you're hiding. I see why you're so quiet. And I am so sorry that no one came to find you. You have to become the witness to your own history. You have to be the one to say that your feelings were valid, even when they were met with a shrug or a blank stare. The echo of neglect tells you that you are a burden. But the truth is that you were a gift that went unopened. Healing means taking that gift back into your own hands. It's about realizing that the silence of your past was a reflection of their limitations, not your worth. You are not a void. You are not an interruption. You are a person whose depth is waiting to be explored. And the first person who needs to truly look at you with curiosity, with warmth, and with unwavering attention is you. We are learning to turn the lights on in the rooms where we were once left alone. And in that light, we are discovering that we were never actually empty. We were just waiting for someone to notice we were there. There is a certain pride we take in saying, I don't need anyone. We wear our independence like a badge of honor, a shining suit of armor that tells the world we are untouchable, unbreakable, and entirely self-sufficient. But if we're being honest, that hyper-independence is often just a sophisticated form of fear. It is the survival strategy of a child who learned, much too early, that the only hands they could truly count on were their own. When you grow up in an environment of neglect, you learn that reaching out is a gamble where the odds are always stacked against you. And after enough times of coming up empty-handed, you simply stop reaching. Think about how this armor shows up in your life today. It's in the way you recoil when a friend offers to help you move, or the way you feel a strange, burning sense of irritation when a partner tries to take a task off your plate. You might tell yourself you're just particular, or that it's easier to do it myself. But beneath that is a terrifying thought. If I let them help me, I am giving them the power to let me down. To a brain wired by neglect, help isn't a gift. It's a vulnerability. It's a debt you don't want to owe, and a disappointment you don't want to feel. You handle the chores, the bills, the emotional crises, and the long-term planning all by yourself, not because you want to, but because the alternative, relying on someone else, feels like walking onto thin ice in the middle of a thaw. This armor is heavy. It's exhausting to be the only person in your world who is allowed to be competent. When you are hyper-independent, you are essentially living in a state of permanent on. You can never truly rest because you don't believe there is a safety net beneath you. If you slip, you fall. That is the law of the fortress you've built. You might find yourself in relationships where you are the strong one, the fixer, or the rock. And while people admire you for it, you feel a growing resentment. You wonder why no one ever takes care of you, yet you realize you've made it nearly impossible for anyone to try. You've built a life that is functionally perfect, but emotionally starving. We have to recognize that this self-reliance isn't a personality trait. It's a scar. It is the result of a wound that told you that your needs were a nuisance. To avoid the pain of being a bother, you decided to have no needs at all. You became a closed loop. But the problem with a closed loop is that nothing can get in, including the very love and connection you're searching for. You are like a person dying of thirst who refuses a glass of water because they didn't draw it from the well themselves. Rewiring this part of your brain means acknowledging that your strength is actually a form of isolation. It means starting to experiment with the terrifying act of being a burden. This looks like letting someone finish a sentence for you, letting someone buy you a coffee, or admitting that you don't have the answer to a problem. These aren't signs of weakness. They are the first cracks in the armor. Every time you allow someone to support you, you are teaching your nervous system a new truth, that the world is not as empty as it used to be. You aren't being strong by carrying the world on your shoulders. You're just staying in the only lane you've ever known, because the other lanes feel like a cliffside. But you were never meant to be an island. You were meant to be part of a landscape. Healing is the process of realizing that the armor that saved your life when you were a child is now the very thing suffocating you as an adult. It is okay to be tired. It is okay to need. It is okay to set the shield down and admit that you cannot and should not do this alone. The bravest thing you will ever do isn't surviving the silence. It's finally asking someone to break it with you. It's a strange and painful paradox. We spend our nights wishing for connection. Yet when someone truly tries to know us, we flinch. We spend our lives searching for a hand to hold. But the moment a hand is extended, our internal alarm bells begin to scream. To a heart that grew up in the quiet shadow of neglect, love does not feel like a warm embrace. It feels like a spotlight. And when you have spent your entire existence hiding your true self to stay safe, being spotted feels like being hunted. Think about the physical sensation that washes over you when a partner or a close friend looks you in the eyes and asks, "What are you thinking?" Or, "How are you, really?" In a healthy internal world, that's an invitation. But for you, it can feel like an interrogation. You might feel a sudden tightness in your throat, a heat rising in your chest, or a desperate urge to crack a joke and change the subject. This is because, to a brain wired by neglect, being known is synonymous with being exposed. You have spent years meticulously crafting a version of yourself that is acceptable, helpful, and easy to be around. You feel that if they see the real you, the messy, needy, frightened, and unfinished version, the illusion will break, and they will eventually turn away, just like the people did in the beginning. The fear of being known is, at its core, the fear of being rejected once the truth is out. When you weren't cherished as a child, you developed a deep-seated belief that your true self is fundamentally flawed or unlovable. You think, if they only knew how much I struggle or how much I actually need them, they'd realize I'm too much work. So, You keep them at arm's length. You share the facts of your day, but never the feelings. You allow them to be near you, but never truly with you. You are a ghost in your own relationship, watching from a distance as they interact with the mask you've put on for their benefit. This creates a cycle of preventative abandonment. You might find yourself picking fights when things get too intimate, or suddenly withdrawing when a relationship starts to feel real. You push them away before they can leave you, convinced that the end is inevitable anyway. It's a way of maintaining control in a world that once offered you none. If you're the one who ends it, or if you're the one who keeps the wall up, then the rejection doesn't catch you off guard. You've traded the possibility of deep joy for the certainty of a familiar loneliness. Rewiring this response requires us to understand that our nervous system is hallucinating a danger that is no longer there. Your body is reacting to a kind word today, as if it were the cold silence of 20 years ago. You have to learn to sit with the vulnerability hangover, that wave of regret or panic that hits you right after you've shared something real. You have to realize that being too much for someone who doesn't know how to love you is not the same thing as being unlovable. Carl Jung once noted that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When you feel that irritation or fear rising up because someone is getting close, stop and ask yourself, what am I trying to protect? Usually, it's that small, unseen child who is still convinced that being noticed leads to pain. Healing is the slow, shaky process of letting someone in anyway. It's about standing still while someone loves you, even when every fiber of your being wants to run. It's the realization that you don't have to be a perfect, polished version of yourself to be worthy of a seat at the table. True intimacy isn't about two perfect people finding each other. It's about two people being brave enough to show their scars and realizing that the light still gets in through the cracks. Deep inside, there's a voice that narrates your life. And usually, it's not a very kind one. It's the voice that tells you you're being too much when you're excited, or too sensitive when you're hurt. It's the quiet, persistent whisper that suggests your successes are just flukes and your mistakes are permanent stains on your character. This voice is not your own, though it sounds like you. It is the internalized version of the emotional neglect you experienced, a parental critic that took up residence in your mind to make sure you never stepped out of line enough to get hurt again. Think about the last time you felt a spark of genuine pride. Maybe you finished a project, or you finally stood up for yourself in a small way. Did you feel a sudden, sharp pullback? Did a voice say, "Don't get ahead of yourself," or "Who do you think you are?" That is the critic at work. It acts as a sort of psychological governor, keeping your emotions within a very narrow, safe range. When you were a child, being invisible was a survival strategy. If you weren't noticed, you couldn't be rejected. If you didn't ask for anything, you couldn't be disappointed. The critic is simply the grown-up version of that survival instinct, still trying to keep you small so you stay safe from the coldness of an empty response. This critic is incredibly clever. It doesn't always sound like a villain. Sometimes it sounds like the voice of reason. It tells you it's just trying to protect you from embarrassment or from being a burden to others. It says, if you don't expect anything, you won't be let down, or just stay quiet and everything will be fine. It uses your own desire for safety against you, turning your inner world into a courtroom where you are always the defendant and the judge is never satisfied. You spend so much energy trying to appease this voice, trying to be perfect or low maintenance, enough to earn its silence. But the silence never comes. The critic doesn't want you to be better. It wants you to be hidden. We often mistake this voice for our conscience or our drive to succeed. But there is a profound difference. A healthy conscience guides you with warmth. The critic drives you with shame. Shame is the tool of neglect. When a child's needs aren't met, they don't stop needing. They simply start hating themselves for having needs. That self-hatred is what fuels the critic. It's a way of saying, I'll reject myself first, so it won't hurt as much when they do it. It is a preemptive strike against the world. To heal, we have to stop treating this voice as the absolute truth. We have to start seeing it as a character, a scared, rigid part of our history that is stuck in a loop. Carl Jung noted that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This means we have to turn toward the critic. Instead of trying to drown it out or argue with it, we look it in the eye. We notice the specific phrases it uses. We notice the way it makes our shoulders hunch and our breath grow shallow. When you hear that voice say you're too much, try to pause. Ask yourself, who told me that first? Whose face am I seeing when I feel this shame? Usually, the critic is just wearing a mask of your own features, but the words belong to the silence of your past. Identifying the critic is the first step in reclaiming your internal narrative. You are learning to distinguish between your true self, the part of you that wants to grow, love, and be seen, and this old security guard who is still patrolling a perimeter that no longer needs guarding. Rewiring your brain means developing a second voice, a witness. This is the part of you that can look at the critic and say, I hear you. I know you're trying to keep me safe from being ignored, but I am an adult now, and I can handle the risk of being seen. You are building a new internal authority, one based on compassion rather than fear. Healing isn't just a mental exercise. It's a physical one. If you pay attention, you can feel the neglect in your body. It is etched into the way you hold your shoulders, the way you sit in a chair, and the way you unconsciously brace yourself when someone walks into the room. This is because your body has a longer memory than your mind. While you might have processed the facts of your childhood, your nervous system is still living in that quiet house, waiting for a response that never comes. The wall isn't just a metaphor. It is a literal tension that lives in your muscles and your breath. Think about the last time a conversation started to get deep, or the moment a partner looked at you with genuine, unfiltered affection. Did you feel that sudden, sharp tightness in your chest? Did your stomach do a strange, hollow flip? Maybe you noticed that you suddenly stopped breathing, holding the air in your lungs, as if movement itself would make you a target. That is the wall. It is your body's way of pulling the shutters closed. It's a physical flinch away from the danger of intimacy. To a brain wired by neglect, being loved feels like being overwhelmed, and your body reacts by trying to turn itself into stone, something that cannot be hurt, but also something that cannot feel. You might find that you are constantly exhausted, even when you haven't done much. That is the physical cost of the wall. It takes a tremendous amount of biological energy to keep your guard up 24 hours a day. You are essentially living in a state of high alert, scanning for the absence of care as if it were a physical threat. This chronic bracing can lead to a feeling of being numb or spaced out. When the world becomes too loud or the emotional stakes get too high, you might feel yourself drifting away, looking down at your life from a great height. This is dissociation, the body's ultimate emergency exit when the wall feels like it's about to crumble. Carl Jung spoke of the body as a doorway to the psyche. And in the case of neglect, the body is often the only part of us that is telling the truth. You might say, "I'm fine with being alone," but your heart rate spikes when the phone rings. You might say, "I don't mind that they forgot my birthday," but your jaw clenches until it aches. Your body is holding the grief that your mind wasn't allowed to express. Every time you were ignored as a child, that frozen energy had to go somewhere. It settled in your tissues, creating a physical map of everywhere you weren't allowed to exist. Rewiring your brain means learning to stay in your body when these feelings arise. It's about noticing the urge to run or shut down, and choosing, just for a second, to take a slow, deep breath. It's about feeling the weight of your feet on the floor and realizing that you are safe in this moment. You aren't that small, invisible child anymore. You are a grown person with the capacity to hold these sensations without being shattered by them. When you start to feel the wall going up, the tightness, the coldness, the withdrawal, don't fight it. If you fight the wall, you only make it stronger. Instead, just notice it. Say to yourself, "My body is trying to protect me right now. It thinks I'm back in the silence." By acknowledging the physical sensation, you start to bridge the gap between your past and your present. You are teaching your nervous system that it can relax its grip. This is slow work. It is the work of unclenching your fists and softening your gaze. Every time you choose to stay present in your body during a vulnerable moment, you are removing a stone from the wall. You are proving to your cells that the air is clear and the ground is solid. You are learning that you don't have to be made of stone to be safe. You can be soft, you can be open, and you can finally let the warmth of the world reach your skin. You don't have to tear the whole fortress down in one day. You don't have to walk into the center of the room and reveal every secret, every scar, and every shadow of your past all at once. In fact, if you tried to do that, your nervous system would likely go into a state of shock, slamming the gates shut even tighter than before. Healing isn't a grand explosion. It's a series of quiet, deliberate choices. It is the act of removing a single brick from the wall and seeing what happens when the light hits the floor on the other side. It is about testing the waters of connection to see if they are finally safe enough to swim in. Think about what this looks like in the tiny, mundane moments of your day. It's that split second when someone asks, "How was your weekend?" And instead of giving the practiced, hollow answer of, "It was good, thanks," you pause. You feel the familiar urge to hide, but you push through it just enough to say, "It was actually a little lonely," or "I had a hard time getting started." It's a small admission, a tiny piece of the truth, but it is a massive shift in your internal geography. In that moment, you are inviting someone to see a real part of you. You are handing them a thread and waiting to see if they pull it or if they let it drop. For someone wired by neglect, these moments feel like standing on the edge of a cliff. Your brain is convinced that by being honest about your needs or your feelings, you are becoming a problem. You are waiting for the other person to look annoyed, to pull away, or to go silent, just like the people in your past did. But every time you reveal a small piece of yourself and the world doesn't end, each time someone meets your vulnerability with a nod, a kind look, or a shared story of their own, your brain receives a new piece of data. It learns that the silence is not the only response available. It learns that intimacy is built in the small exchanges, not just the big ones. This testing of the waters is also about learning to handle the vulnerability hangover. That is the wave of panic that often hits an hour after you've shared something real. It's that voice that wakes you up at night saying, "Why did I say that? Now they think I'm broken. I should have just stayed quiet." When that feeling comes, try to recognize it as a sign of growth. It is the old guard of your fortress doing one last patrol, trying to convince you that safety lies in secrecy. But you are beginning to prove the guard wrong. You are realizing that the safety of being hidden was actually just the comfort of a familiar prison. Testing the waters also means learning to ask for what you need before you reach a breaking point. It's saying, "I could really use a bit of reassurance today," or "Could we just sit together for a while?" To you, these requests might feel like heavy demands, but to someone who loves you, they are directions. They are the map that tells them how to reach you. When you were a child, you had to guess how to be loved. As an adult, you get to participate in the process. You are teaching people how to be there for you, and in doing so, you are healing the part of you that believed no one ever would. These small moments of vulnerability are the seeds of a new life. They are the data points that slowly rewire your brain from a state of threat to a state of connection. You are discovering that being known isn't the same thing as being judged. You are finding that when you show your messy, unfinished parts, people often respond by showing you theirs. The fear begins to lose its grip as you realize that love isn't something you have to be perfect to receive. It's something that happens in the spaces where we are brave enough to be imperfect together. You are learning to trust the water, one toe at a time, until one day you realize you aren't just testing it, you're finally breathing in it. To move forward, we have to sit with the sadness of what we didn't get. It is a heavy, quiet kind of mourning, because you aren't grieving a person who died. You are grieving the childhood that never lived. You are grieving the protection you didn't feel, the guidance you didn't receive, and the warmth that was never offered. Often, we try to positive think our way out of this, telling ourselves that it wasn't that bad, or that others had it worse. But you cannot heal what you refuse to feel. You cannot build a new house on top of a foundation of frozen tears. Acknowledging the neglect isn't about staying stuck in the past or blaming those who failed you. It's about finally validating your own experience. Think about the ideal version of a childhood, the one where a child falls and knows without a shadow of a doubt that someone will run to pick them up. Or the version where a child's excitement is met with a smile that says, "I am so glad you exist." When you realize that you didn't have that, it feels like a physical ache. It's the realization that you had to learn to be your own hero before you even knew how to be a kid. You had to learn how to soothe your own nightmares, how to feed your own curiosity, and how to carry the weight of the world on shoulders that were still so small. This grief often shows up in adulthood at the strangest times. You might be watching a movie where a parent holds a child, or you might see a stranger in a park tie their kid's shoelace with such tenderness that it makes your throat tighten. That sudden, sharp pang of jealousy or sadness is the unseen child within you, crying out for the care they missed. It is okay to let that sadness in. It is okay to say, "It was unfair that I had to be so strong so early." By naming the loss, you are finally giving yourself the attention that was missing back then. You are becoming the witness to your own life that you always deserved. We often run from this grief because we fear it will drown us. We think that if we start crying for that little girl or boy, we will never stop. But grief is not a hole. It is a tunnel. The only way to get to the other side, to the place where you can finally accept love, is to walk through the darkness of what was lost. You have to honor the fact that you survived a desert. You have to acknowledge how hard it was to grow up without a map, without a mirror, and without a safety net. When you sit with this grief, you are performing an act of profound self-love. You are saying to your younger self, "I see you now. I see how lonely you were. I see how hard you tried to be good so you wouldn't be forgotten. In that moment of acknowledgement, the parental critic loses its power because you are replacing its coldness with your own warmth. You are parenting your own pain. This is the bridge to rewiring your brain. Once you grieve the fact that you weren't cherished then, you can stop frantically trying to earn that missing love from everyone you meet now. You stop looking for your parents in the faces of your partners or your friends. You realize that while you can't go back and change the beginning of your story, you can change the person who is reading it. You are stepping out of the role of the victim and into the role of the healer. You are learning that while the past was empty, the present doesn't have to be. By mourning what was missed, you are clearing the space to finally receive what is actually here. There is a profound, life-altering shift that happens when you realize you don't have to earn your place in a relationship or in the world at large. For so long, your existence has been conditional. You've lived under the unspoken rule that to be tolerated, you must be useful. To be loved, you must be perfect. And to stay safe, you must be the one who provides everything and asks for nothing. You have spent your life acting as a guest in your own skin, constantly checking to see if your lease is about to expire. But the truth is, you have a right to take up space simply because you are here. Your breath is your permit. Your heartbeat is your standing invitation. Think about how often you apologize for things that require no apology. You apologize for having a preference on where to eat, for needing a moment of silence, or for simply being in the way of someone's path. This is the reflex of a person who was taught that their presence was a burden to be managed rather than a life to be celebrated. You've spent years trying to be the funniest person in the room, the most productive employee, or the most self-sacrificing partner, all because you're terrified that if you stop performing, the people around you will realize there's no reason for you to stay. You are running a race that has no finish line, trying to prove your worth to a ghost. Reclaiming the right to exist means looking at those old contracts and tearing them up. It is the quiet, radical act of sitting on the couch and doing absolutely nothing, and realizing that you are still worthy of love even when you aren't being productive. It is the moment you realize that your friends don't just like you for what you do for them, but for who you are with them. As Jung suggested, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And you can choose to become someone who exists without an explanation. This process is about moving from doing to being. When you were small, doing was your shield. If you did the dishes, got the straight A's, or kept the house quiet, you felt a temporary sense of safety. But that safety was a hollow substitute for belonging. Now, as an adult, you are learning that belonging is something you carry with you. It is the realization that you are not a guest in the world. You are part of the landscape. You don't have to be the most helpful person at the table to deserve a seat at it. Your value isn't a score that fluctuates based on how much emotional labor you perform for others. Imagine what it would feel like to walk into a room and not immediately look for how you can be of service. Imagine the freedom of saying no and trusting that the person on the other side won't disappear. This is the heart of rewiring for love. You are teaching your brain that love is not a paycheck for services rendered. It is a gift given to the soul. You are learning to receive without the immediate, panicky urge to repay the kindness. You are allowing yourself to be the center of someone's attention without feeling like you're stealing something that doesn't belong to you. This is the hardest part of the journey because it requires you to face the void where your self-worth was supposed to be built. But in that void, you can finally plant something new. You can start to say, I am allowed to be tired. I am allowed to be messy. I am allowed to have needs that I cannot meet by myself. Every time you stand your ground, every time you take a deep breath and stay in the room when you feel like a bother, you are reclaiming a piece of your territory. You are becoming the architect of a life where your happiness is just as important as everyone else's. You are finally coming home to yourself, and for the first time in your life, you are realizing that the door was always meant to be open for you. Rewiring is a slow, quiet process of building a new map for a world you are only just beginning to trust. For most of your life, you have been navigating by an old map, one where the roads all led back to isolation, where safety was found in the dark, and where every bridge to another person was marked with a warning sign. That old map served you well when you were small and the world was cold. It kept you alive. But now, you are realizing that the old map is leading you in circles. It is time to draw something new. This new map doesn't lead you toward the fortress. It leads you toward intimacy, risk, and the beautiful, terrifying possibility of being understood. Think about what it feels like to use this new map for the first time. It's the moment you feel the familiar urge to shut down during a disagreement. But instead of retreating into the silence, you stay. You find the words to say, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed right now, but I'm not leaving. In that moment, you are drawing a new road. You are teaching your heart that conflict doesn't have to mean abandonment, and that staying is a form of power. There will be days when the fog rolls in and the old map feels like the only one that makes sense. Days when the fear returns and the walls feel like they're closing back in. That's okay. The goal isn't to never feel afraid again. The goal is to not let the fear hold the compass. This new map is marked with different landmarks. Instead of the wall of self-reliance, you have the bridge of asking. Instead of the forest of invisibility, you have the clearing of being seen. You are learning to recognize the landmarks of a healthy connection, the way a friend's eyes light up when you walk in, the way a partner holds space for your messy thoughts without trying to fix them, the way the air feels lighter when you aren't carrying a secret. You are discovering that the danger you were so afraid of, the danger of being known, is actually the only place where you can finally catch your breath. Every time you choose to be known, Every time you allow yourself to be loved without apologizing for it, you are carving a deeper path into the landscape of your life. You are proving to yourself that the quiet heart is finally loud enough to be heard, and that it has something vital to say. You are moving from a state of surviving to a state of belonging. It's a transition from being a ghost in your own story to being the one who writes the ending. You are realizing that while you cannot change the beginning of your map, the parts where the paths were lonely and the markers were missing, you are the one holding the pen now. This journey of connection is not about reaching a perfect destination where you never feel the sting of neglect again. It is about building the resilience to know that if someone does turn away, you will not vanish. Your existence is no longer tied to their reflection. On this new map, the most important destination is the one where you are at peace with yourself. You are learning that you are a person worth knowing, worth holding, and worth waiting for. As you move forward, remember that every step is a victory. Every time you reach out, every time you stay present, every time you choose vulnerability over the familiar ache of the armor, you are changing the very structure of your world. You are no longer defined by the silence of your past. You are defined by the courage of your present. The architecture of the quiet heart is finally opening its windows, and for the first time, the light is staying. You aren't just drawing a map to someone else. You are drawing the map that finally leads you home. If you're still listening, I want you to know that the fortress you built kept you safe, but you don't have to live there anymore. If this felt like a mirror to your own experience, leave a comment with the word "seen." It's a small way for us to acknowledge each other in the silence. Take care of that quiet heart of yours. See you in the next one.